What did Native Americans eat when there was no more game? In this video, I will reveal many secrets and interesting facts. We are used to thinking that life on the Great Plains depended solely on the pursuit of bison. But when the game disappeared, the picture changed. Roots, bark, fats, and forgotten survival techniques came into play. People dug secret storerooms in the prairie, removed the inner layer of bark, melted fat from stored bones, and turned bitter fruits into food. There is no romance in these practices, but there is knowledge of the land, the seasons, and patience. Each handful of dried roots is a reminder of December without hunting and January without trails. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the indigenous peoples of North America turned nothing into energy, warmth, and a reliable diet during the hardest months. I will reveal the best-kept secret. When the game disappeared, it was not arrows that became the true support, but a shovel for roots. Timpsila, or prairie breadroot, was visible only to those who knew its leaves and season. For the Lakota and Cheyenne, it is not an exotic delicacy, but a staple food during times of famine. The roots were dug up by women and men who had experience reading the land. It takes not strength, but a sense of depth when the tip of the stick hits a dense tuber. And now there are dry white pieces in the basket, which will become flour and soup. Timpsila was valued for its stability and storage properties. The root dried easily in the sun and did not mold when properly ventilated. It could be ground into coarse flour, boiled, steamed, or mixed with fat. It had a rich flavor and provided a long-lasting feeling of fullness. No salt or spices were needed, just patience and boiling water. Searching for roots was part of the calendar. In spring, the plants revealed themselves with green feathers. In summer, with inconspicuous flowers. In autumn and early winter, memory came into play. Where the bunches grew, there the tubers were found. They relied on marks on stones and characteristic mounds. The earth became a map without lines or ink. The tool looked simple. It could be a sturdy stick with a pointed end. Sometimes a bone spike or a stone wedge was added. Such a digger did not break the root or damage the soil. It lasted for a season, or even two. The taste of timpsila was mild and restrained. Its sweetness manifested itself after long cooking or baking in an ash pit. The dry root was placed in bags which were hidden from moisture. Part of the reserves were left in seasonal camps. This is how the tribe's invisible pantry was formed. When frost froze the soil, they went to sandy mounds where it was easier to dig. There, the wind removed the top layer, and the root waited underneath. Often, another one was found nearby, hidden more tightly. Each success saved a day's journey. Each handful of dried slices reduced the risk. Timpsila was not the only root. There were other edible species in the prairie and forest steppe. But it was this root that most often served as a bridge between rare hunting successes. Its flour thickened the soup made from dried berries. Its slices were dried until crisp. This practice shaped character. The prairie taught patience, attention, and economy of movement. Those who saw the earth as text read the season like a book. Those who counted the roots counted the days until spring. In the corner, they kept another bag for a really dark day. What you have never seen. Behind a modest pile of dried timpsila stood a school of observation. This is not a legend, but an everyday discipline, and it saved them in the hours when the hunt was silent. Do you agree that knowledge of plants can be more important than successful shooting in hungry January? Write where you are watching us from and subscribe to the channel. Your opinion and support are important to us. Are you ready to learn the truth about the forgotten breads of the prairie? When the hunting trails were deserted, seeds came to the fore. They were gathered from the ground, shaken into baskets, cleaned, and cooked. The work seemed monotonous, but it provided a lot of calories. You needed to know the right places and the seasons. Where dry stalks rustled at the end of summer, by fall there was a whole meal waiting to be harvested. Wild rice was gathered in the eastern forests and near the Great Lakes. It is not like the rice we are used to, but it behaves similarly in a pot. The grains were removed from the panicles with careful blows so as not to lose the future harvest. Some fell into the water and sprouted, some went into sacks. This is how the cycle was maintained. The grains were dried in the air and heated for storage. Then they were crushed, separating the husk. The result was a grain with a smooth aroma. It went well with dried berries and fat. It was added to soups and porridges. It was not a luxury, but a staple. On the plains, seeds were taken from grasses and semi-shrubs. There they gathered panicles, shook them over leather bags, and blew off the husks. Then came the rough grinding. The loose mixture behaved well in boiling water and retained heat. The food became thick and slow. Seeds were a reliable source of food if collected on time. If you missed a week, you lost a month's worth of food. Therefore, camps were planned with harvesting in mind. They returned to places where the previous year's harvest had been good. They carried the experience of their elders into the new season. The calendar did not hang on the wall, it lay in a bag. Wild rice and seed mixtures were a convenient currency of exchange. They were exchanged for dishes, stone blades, and dried berries, sometimes for pieces of maple sugar. This exchange network held the shores and steppes together. Where hunting failed, a bag of grain helped. The grain was combined with roots and fat. This is how a sustainable diet was born. Fat provided energy, grain provided the body of the dish, and roots provided thickener. This simple combination solved the problem of cold nights and the journey to the next source of food. Seeds taught patience and counting. They had to be dried, ground, and hidden from moisture. They had to be divided into weeks. They had to remember where the next bay was. It was not a quick way, but it was a sure one. Guess what happened next? The seed map led to the bark and inner layer of trees when the grains ran out. There, behind the cracks in the bark, another resource was hidden. What do you think about this step-by-step food system during the hungry months? And which hidden bread seems most interesting to you? In the next chapter, we'll move on to bread from trees and ways to make bitter things edible. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about. Trees feed us not only with shade and smoke. The inner bark, or cambium, became food during the most difficult weeks. It was removed in thin strips from living trees without killing the trunk. They looked for a flexible layer between the rough bark and the hard wood. It was this layer that made it soft when cooked. This required experience and a sense of proportion. Pine and birch were more often chosen in the northern forests. In the prairie outskirts, attention was paid to suitable local species. The strips were dried, ground, and boiled until transparent. They produced a thick mass, which was thickened with root crumbs. The taste was modest but tolerable. There was enough energy for the journey. Cambium was not a permanent food. It was a stepping stone between reserves and spring greens. But without this step, the chain would break. The toughness was removed by long soaking and patient cooking. Water from a clean source and the even heat of coals were used. The result was viscous and stringy. In some families, the inner bark was mixed with root flour. This balanced the taste and density. Dried berries were added to give it a sour taste. Sometimes maple sugar was added, if the location was geographically suitable. This made the food not only tolerable but also familiar to the taste memory. It was important not to deplete the trees. Narrow vertical strips were removed, leaving the trunk alive. They returned to it years later, not days later. This measured approach made the forest a partner, not a victim. This rule was not written on the bark, it was passed down by word of mouth. Bark was not only food, but also a binding ingredient. It was added to thick dishes to save grain. Its thin shavings became a thickener for seed soup. Its powder gave density without excess salt. It was simple technology. There were also everyday drinks made from bark and twigs. They were used to make infusions that warmed and sustained. The taste was resinous but clean. They helped to endure the cold wind and long evenings. Survival cuisine depended on such small things. What we found in the old archives, the inner bark was respected not for its taste, but for its predictability. It was always close to fire, water, and patience. It did not require courage, only care. This is how weeks, not days, were survived. If you are interested in the history of everyday life, check out other videos on the channel. They feature the same simple solutions, only in different conditions and eras. They form a general picture of life without excess. If you want more stories about survival and everyday life, check out our selection on the main page. Are you ready for the shocking truth? During the endlessly windy months, it was not volume but energy density that saved people. Fat became the main currency of the cold. It was melted from stored pieces, kept in bags and leather containers. It was mixed with dried crumbs and berries. This resulted in food that could be carried and eaten on the go. Fat mixtures provided stability. A small piece replaced a bowl of porridge. It did not require fire and was not affected by the wind. It could be divided into daily portions. It was quiet and inconspicuous. Bones from the reserves were not thrown away. They were crushed and boiled for a long time. Nutrients and residual fats came out of the surface. The broth became rich and thick. After cooling, it could be cut off and used as fuel. This practice united the plains and the forests. Some added seeds, some added roots, some added the tartness of berries. The ingredients were adapted to the locality, but the principle remained the same. Energy is greater than volume. Dry slices of roots were soaked in fat. This made them softer and more caloric. They were used to grease the stone slab for baking flatbread. They were used to keep the fire burning at a low heat. It worked wherever endurance was required. Fat was stored without excess air or moisture. It was packed into tight containers. It was kept in a cool, shady place. It was divided into long-term and short-term portions. Care was taken not to open it unnecessarily. It was not extravagance, but strategy. The cold and wind showed no mercy to those who were unprepared. In such conditions, fat did not provide flavor, but a day's journey without stopping. It turned the empty landscape into a passable road. In the next chapter, you will learn what happens when winter suffocates water with ice and the earth holds roots tighter than stone. We will descend to the shores where last year's maple and birch trees hide sweetness and cattails bring back a feeling of warmth. What do you think is more important in the cold? Taste or calories? And what was your warmest winter drink? When the hunt is silent, sweetness gives strength to the voice and clarity to the mind. In the northeastern forests, they knew the value of maple sap. The sap was collected at the right time when the night was still cold and the day was already milder. It was evaporated into syrup and sugar. The grains were not afraid of the road or time. They sweetened life without unnecessary words. Maple sugar was not a delicacy, but a tool. It was used to balance the bitterness of the bark and the tartness of the roots. It sustained children and the elderly during long nights. It lifted spirits when the frost lingered for weeks. A small pinch changed the whole bowl. It was the cuisine of moderation. Birch sap came a little later. It was lighter and thinner in taste. It was drunk fresh and used to make thick drinks. It was used to soften root crumbs. It was used to wash down seed porridge. It was the air of spring at the end of winter. The northern winter taught us to share sweetness. Sugar was not eaten by the handful. It was crumbled into soup. Syrup was not drunk by the cupful. It was dripped into a cup. This is how we saved and stretched out the joy. This is how we endured the week until the first grass appeared. This is how we kept our minds calm. There were warm infusions made from twigs and pine cones. They were not called medicine, they were simply a drink. They warmed the hands and provided an evening ritual. Their taste was simple and pure. They reminded us that time was moving on. Sweetness also helped with trade. Roots, seeds, and stone blades were exchanged for sugar. It connected the forest and the plains. It paid off debts and opened doors. It was respected and cherished. This sweet line led through the whole winter. It made the sour tolerable, the bitter edible, and the empty full. There was no luxury in it, only the ability to find time. Each crystal was a note from spring. When the early thaw began, the camp came alive. It seemed as if the air itself had softened. People repeated familiar movements like a song, and in that song, the future green day could be heard. Sugar was its preface. You will be surprised to learn what was considered the best reserve for a hungry spring. It is not meat or grain, but cattail, a plant with soft, fluffy inflorescences and thick rhizomes. For those who lived near swamps and lakes, it was a salvation. Its roots and shoots are edible if you know how to handle them. They were dug up in cold water, washed, dried, and ground into powder. This powder was used to make a porridge similar to thick flour. Rugazovaya flour contains starch and a little sweetness. It could be baked on a hot stone, mixed with fat or bark. Its smell was fresh like the shore after rain. It helped people hold out until the first grasses appeared. They worked carefully near the water. The cold and icy waves could sap their strength faster than they could catch prey. But the risk was worth it. A kilogram of rhizomes replaced several days of hunting. Young cattail shoots were also eaten, raw or lightly blanched. The taste was reminiscent of a mixture of cucumber and stem. It was the first green taste after winter, and the body gratefully accepted it. The fluffy inflorescences were used to make infusions for colds and pillows for sleeping. Food always had a practical use. Cattail connected the earth and water, like a bridge between seasons. It taught that even in the mud you can find purity. It was stored at campsites near shallow swamps, where hollowed-out baskets with dried roots were also left. Each basket represented a week of peace. This plant did not just save people from hunger, it restored rhythm. When a person went to the water to gather roots, they understood that life goes on, the ice has broken, and the season is moving forward. Thus, a simple marsh plant became a symbol of hope. Now you will hear something that rarely makes it into books. When there was no game, small sources of protein were used: fish, mollusks, larvae, grasshoppers. This is not romanticism, but pragmatism. Protein and fat without fire, quick and accurate. The ability to see food where others see only movement. On the plains, they caught fish from temporary streams and ponds, and in the northern regions, from ice holes. Fish was eaten fresh, dried, and even in the form of dried powder. The heads and bones were used to make a thick broth, which thickened into jelly. It could be stored and taken with you. Insects were collected seasonally. Grasshoppers were dried in the sun and ground into flour. The result was a protein powder that was added to roots and seeds. Locusts were baked in hot sand, then cleaned of their wings. They tasted like crunchy nuts. This was not considered shameful, but rather a sign of observantness. Larvae and mollusks were collected near the water. They had to be cooked, but they provided substantial food. They were used rarely as an emergency reserve. However, during harsh winters, they provided a chance to survive. The taste was neutral, but the effect was noticeable. This is how the unnoticeable ecology of survival developed. Anything that moved could become part of the cycle. The main thing was the purity of the source and attentiveness. People knew when water was safe and when it was not. This knowledge was not written down. It lived in memory and hearsay. Today, such food is surprising. But in those conditions, it was a diet of reason, not despair. Every gram of protein gave you a day's journey. Every handful of dried insects was worth hundreds of calories. Nature did not divide food into acceptable and foreign. It simply offered a choice. When summer returned, the earth revealed its sweet and rich bounty. The air became softer, the smells thicker. Berries and nuts were not just food. They were proof that winter had not been in vain. The first berries were picked with care, almost with gratitude. For each bush, for each cluster, for the fact that they had flavor and not just calories. People knew that berries were in no hurry, just like the earth itself. The harvest was never noisy. They went in pairs or threes, no more. One looked up at the canopy, the other looked down at their feet. There was almost no conversation. The only sounds were the crackling of branches, the rustling of baskets, and breathing. Silence helped not only to concentrate, but also to listen to the earth. Where a bumblebee buzzed, there were raspberries. Where a bee buzzed, there were rose hips. This is how they recognized the season by sounds, not by the calendar. Blueberries, viburnum, erga, rose hips. Each has its own character. Blueberries love shade and sour sand. Viburnum loves lowlands near water. Erga stretches toward the sun, and rose hips grow at the edge of fields. Each bush is a geography of taste. People knew where the harvest was best each year and did not confuse the locations. What they did not eat right away, they dried. They spread the berries on bark, turned them over, and watched the sun. Dry berries did not lose their color if they were dried slowly, without haste. When the berries lost moisture, they were crushed into a paste and shaped into flat cakes. Sometimes they were mixed with melted fat, turning them into a supply for a long journey. This product was called by different names: pemmican, road food, food without a fire. It was not beautiful, but it was powerful. It did not mold, did not break, did not require fire. It could be eaten on the go, as a reminder of summer when everything around was gray and cold. Nuts were obtained differently. They were not gathered by the handful, like berries. They were found, chipped off, and cleaned. Stones served as hammers and mortars. It was hard work, but worth the effort. The nuts were made into a paste, thick, oily, with a warm smell. It was dried to prevent it from going rancid and stored in birch bark boxes. This fat was pure, not bloody, and therefore especially valuable. It had no taste of fear, only of sun and trees. Nuts and berries together made up a complete meal. Meat was filling but tiring, fat was warming but made you sleepy. Only sweetness restored vigor and joy. Therefore, after the long winter months, it was berries that were considered medicine, not for the body, but for the spirit. They were given first to the sick and the elderly. A few dried berries in the palm of your hand were a sign that life goes on. Each tribe had its own sweet spots. They were known like family trees. Sometimes it took a day to get there, sometimes 3. The elders showed the young people the trails, not straight ones, but detours, so as not to destroy the nests or disturb the animals. Branches that yielded particularly large amounts of berries were marked with knots or notches on neighboring trees. It was a paperless map of the harvest, a kind of language of the earth, where each mark was a promise to return. These places belonged to no one, but everyone knew the boundaries of respect. They did not gather everything they saw. They left some for the birds, animals, and for the next year. This is how a balance was maintained that did not need laws. It lived in habit. When the berries and nuts were gathered, it was time to preserve them. They were dried in the sun, on stones, on sheets of grass. Not in the heat, but in the warmth. Haste burned the taste. Sometimes they were sprinkled with ash to repel insects. The bags were made of skins or thick nettle fabric. Anything that could hold air was suitable. These bags were not just a supply, they were a chronicle. Each handful was a day lived without loss. When people set off on a journey, the bags of berries went with them. They lay next to weapons and tools. They were open not for food but for memories. The taste of summer restored strength when the earth became harsh and hungry again. Each piece of dried berry or nut paste contained more than just calories. It was a piece of time, a memory of warmth, green shade, and the buzzing of bees. Food that captured the season provided not only energy, but also the confidence that winter would end again. And when spring came around again, the old sacks weren't completely emptied. Some of it was left behind, as a lure for happiness, as a promise that next summer would come. The earth accepted this gift calmly. She knew that people would return, and everything would start again. And now the moment when everything comes together. There were no random foods in the diet. Roots, bark, fat, seeds, berries, fish. Everything had a role. The main thing was balance and consistency. Each dish had a purpose: to warm, to satisfy, to preserve strength. The main principle was mixture and patience. Roots were boiled with seeds, fat, and berries. Everything was turned into a thick porridge that could be stored. Sometimes it was dried to the consistency of dense tiles. These were the canned goods of their time. They rarely fried food, but cooked it often. The oven was replaced by pits with coals and hot stones. Dishes that did not require constant attention were slowly cooked there. The heat was distributed gently, and the taste was preserved. In the evening, the pit was opened, and the smell reminded everyone that life goes on. There were different types of dishes: clay, wooden, stone, but more often than not, they did without them. Food was wrapped in leaves or bark, cooked in bags, and placed on hot stones. Simple technologies that did not require metal. There were also expensive dishes, energy concentrates. They were made in advance and not eaten unnecessarily. They were treated with respect, almost like medicine. These portions determined the outcome of the transition, illness, or snowfall. This cuisine taught economy. Nothing was thrown away. Everything became part of a new cycle. Even ash was important. It was used to dry roots, protecting them from moisture. Ash, fat, berries, 3 elements of everyday survival alchemy. This story is not about taste, but about the balance between man and the earth. The people we are accustomed to calling Indians were not looking for exoticism. They were looking for sustainability. They understood that food is not just calories, but a connection. The root is a map, fat is energy, the seed is the future. When the game disappeared, the land remained. It did not betray those who treated it without haste. Every plant, every snag, every spoonful of fat was part of a single agreement: respect and moderation. This knowledge has almost disappeared, but traces of it remain. In place names, in old recipes, in rituals of gratitude. They remind us that sustainability is not built on excess, it is built on the ability to see enough. Today we may consider ourselves abundant, but our dependence on fragile systems makes us vulnerable. Old methods do not call us back. They show us that we can also be mindful of what lies ahead. Survival is not a struggle against nature, but a conversation with it. So what did the Indians eat when there was no more game? They ate the earth, in the most literal and respectful sense. Roots, bark, fat, seeds, berries, fish, cattails. Everything the world offered without hunting. And all of this was transformed into a sustainable, well-thought-out food system. Not romance, not myth, just life, where knowledge and moderation replaced abundance, where a hand that knew how to dig the earth was worth more than a sharp-eyed archer. If you are interested in how these traditions resonate with the modern concept of sustainable nutrition, write in the comments. We will collect material on the return of ancient logic to the 21st century. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories. And remember, food is a way to listen to the earth.